Hello, everyone who is joining us today. As far as we are close to end of the year and everybody's like wrapping up the year, we are wrapping up our season. This is iGaming Accent brought to you by SBC Advisory, and this is our 18th episode this year. I think that this will be our last episode for 2025, and for the wrap up, I have one of the good guests of mine, Anton Kaszubowski, who is an entrepreneur, a multi-exit person that has done a long journey in our industry and now is he's a founder and managing person behind SBC Advisors. Today we'll be discussing his paths, how he got into the industry, what was his biggest, let's say, missteps, biggest wins, achievements, and everything in between these two. Hello, Anton. Nice to have you today.
Hi, Vakho. It's a pleasure to be here. I'm not sure you've left the best till last, but I'll do my best to have a good end of the year podcast. And thank you for having me. It's a really nice way to wrap up the year professionally.
For me personally, I think that you are coming in like a dessert, like a last meal served, and everybody loves the last thing that is on the table. So let's make it that way. And to start with who you are, I think that some of our listeners might know about you, might have met you many times within the industry events and might know about SBC Advisors. But to whoever is joining us for the first time and seeing you for the first time, can you briefly introduce yourself, who you are, what you do? And then let's talk about your path as well.
Sure. I mean, I'm a bit of an industry dinosaur. Yeah, I started focusing on the online gaming industry when I was an investment banker back in around 2001, 2002. When there was, the first technology, I was a technology investment banker focused on technology and media companies, and saw this sort of the beginnings of the real emergence of online gaming at that time. And it wasn't a very popular sector among banks and investment bankers, but that I was very much attracted to it because I could see the growth when a lot of other technology companies were suffering as the internet bubble burst. So that's when I started really looking at the sector and became increasingly involved in it, and was sort of from 2003 onwards when I left investment banking. Yeah, I've been involved ever since.
So a long way, as humble as it might be, a dinosaur in this way is like the best way to describe it, but in a really, really good way, because you've been in the industry for more than 20 years. And I think that that is also a really good thing. So as I understood, you started from investment banking, right? And investment bank led one thing led to another. And can you little bit tell me, like, what was your first project or first interaction with our industry?
I started networking in the industry, as I say, 2001, 2002, as a banker looking for sort of M&A deals, financing deals in the sector. By that point, I worked for a boutique investment bank. It doesn't exist now. It was bought by a larger bank. But before that, I was at larger banks like JP Morgan and Bank Boston. But because we were a boutique bank, and I was trying to forge a career as a deal maker, so still pretty early on. I was just a VP, just trying to move on from associate and start building my own revenue streams. Really, online gaming caught my eye. I was a bit of a gambler at the time, as a lot of investment bankers are. I probably lost more money than I should, but, I enjoyed it mostly, and got to know the products and really saw a lot of traction in the industry. As a new emerging sector of gambling, but also entertainment. Started networking, found it very, very easy as a 26, 27-year-old banker to meet with CEOs. I was meeting with people like Mark Blanford, who started Sporting Bet, who's a great guy and a real sort of legend of the industry. Richard Glynn, who was one of the founders of Sporting Index, and I think he latterly went on to be CEO of Ladbrokes for a while. So, found it as a young banker, I found the industry to be extremely open. Obviously, they were looking for access to finance and banks, so it suited the entrepreneurs and individuals in the industry, but they were also extremely open to meeting and networking. And from there on, I met many people, and I landed my first role in the sector. I decided to leave banking. It wasn't
Hmm.
ultimately for me. I was attracted by the more entrepreneurial aspects of the online gaming industry and actually building businesses. And I didn't quite know I was going to be going on to be an entrepreneur and start my own businesses at the time. But I certainly want to get more involved in building businesses.
Yeah. Can you a little bit describe as far as like what you are saying right now is that when you were younger, like 27, 28 years old for investment banking, it was quite easy to have a communication with the CEOs, C-level people within the industry. What do you see? Is it still the same, easier? Like, are there still like no barriers of people coming into the industry and speaking with the C-level people, or is there any like changes into that situation right now? How open is our industry right now to those kind of networking and those kind of introductions?
I think it generally is quite an open industry. I think it's a
Mm-hmm.
very kind of entrepreneur, the type of individual that's attracted to this sector and industry and this type of product is usually quite open-minded,
Uh-huh.
liberal, entrepreneurial, attracted by kind of innovation. So it leads to a personality type that's quite open. So I
Mm-hmm.
think while the industry has got a lot larger, a lot more layers of management and operations, um, and so it is much harder to get to senior people. I think if you know meet them at a conference or manage to get introduced to them, I think you'll find them to be very open and willing to be communicate and be part of a community. I do think that what we see through the SBC events and
Yeah.
sports betting community is the name that people really do come together in our industry, and even though it's grown an enormous amount, it still has that great community aspect to it.
Exactly, exactly. Still think that even though the layers have increased from the ones that, for example, like few years ago, there were no regional directors there. So like only one director was managing multiple regions. Maybe more people edit, but at the same time, more people, more connections, more networking, and you can get into the right room with the right people. Pretty fast compared to other industries. Let's compare even from the banking perspective or finance or e-commerce perspective. Like you need like layers of communication or the bureaucracy to get into the room to the right person. But here it's much more, let's say, appealing and much more easy. I really want to talk about your transitional role. So from investment banking, you became the entrepreneur, right? You founded your company. Can you tell me what was the company about and why did you found it and what was the expectations and then
Well,
reality?
sure. I actually, when my first role out of banking was not a company that I founded. I was part of the early management team. It was actually a company that was founded by two of the founders of a company called Cryptologic, which I think was the first Nasdaq listed gaming company back in the late 90s or early 2000s. This was their kind of second venture. It originally was called CES Software, but then we rebranded the company Fund Technologies, and I joined sort of support part of the management team. It was a cash sell on the AIM market in the UK. I think it was about a 15 million pound valued cash sell when I joined.
Uh-huh.
And we then, with through their leadership and my support, we grew the business over a period of let's say 3 or 4 years, 3.5, 4 years, very rapidly, mainly through raising additional finance on the public markets and then
Uh-huh.
acquiring businesses strategically, acquiring businesses for let's say cash flow and
Uh-huh.
profitability, a bit of, let's say, acquisition arbitrage from the buying companies at a lower valuation and backing them into a listed vehicle that has a higher valuation. But the areas where we really the business focused were skill gaming
Uh-huh.
and fantasy sports, both globally. I think the biggest footprints were in North America for both products. Quite a lot of reach in Europe. We were both B2C and B2B for
Uh-huh.
both products. And then the third product that we acquired into was sports data. It's probably not people don't remember because everyone talks about Benji Cherniak as the founder of Dom Best, but actually Dom Best existed way before Benji. He did a
Uh-huh.
great job with the business, but we actually acquired the business, Fund Technologies, and we held it and managed it until we sold our business in total. And that was an odds compilation business and data business
Mhm.
based out of Las Vegas, really powering the pricing for Las Vegas sports books. It was a very cash generative business, and we use that as a basis for increasing our
Valuation?
valuation
Yeah.
and also moving into a new product category. So again, from that was a mainly B2B business. We were using the data to power sports books or
Other sports
pricing in
books. Yeah.
sports books in Vegas, and also game early match trackers and game trackers primarily for US sports for a lot of the portals like Yahoo, etc.
Okay, so quite a interesting portfolio because you at the same time had B2B products and B2C products, and I think that learning from both sides helped you scale up one another. And I really like the fact that you were like evolving the company in a way that all the values that can different aspects of the different businesses can be bringing into the company were both like emanate like on a different level. So for example, you had like fan engagement part of it, like fantasy sports and so on, and you bought in the sports data company in order to power not only sportsbook but your internal products as well. I think that would be a really really good, like
Yeah,
great value added.
and we used, we raised money and we acquired. I think we made about 8 acquisitions in the period of 3 years, and some of them were substantial acquisitions. It was, truthfully, it was quite chaotic when you have that many new companies in your business and they're not really integrated, and the management teams aren't integrated and still have their own um, agendas. And yeah, it was a challenging, a really interesting time for me. I mean, part of the reason I was brought on board was because of my mergers and acquisitions experience to help support the growth of the business. So it was super interesting, super challenging once you'd made the acquisitions, actually, to try and manage those business. I was managing director and
Mhm.
responsible really for the European operations and trying to bring our products to customers in Europe and also grow our B2C presence.
Quick question. As far as you mentioned that there were 8 acquisitions, so was there any playbook by which you assessed which company to buy and which company to pass on? Did you had like an approach of what we want to do and how this company adds value to what we are creating right now? Can you share a little bit insight into that?
Well, I think it was very much about acquiring a position in the market or a product stroke market, and then expanding that position. So we were buying
Mhm.
competitors effectively. My CEO at the time, who was effectively the main founder of the business, co-founded it with another gentleman. He was, an amazing investor relations. It was obviously more than that, but he was really strong on managing investors and investor relations, and a lot of the strategy for the acquisitions was about appealing to building a business, but really
Mhm.
appealing to the public markets investors who were backing the business and wanted to see consistent growth and a consistent strategy. And he was very, very good at articulating that, and something
Nice.
that I learned from him.
Nice, because you have to have too many, let's say, stakeholders to satisfy. Like when you are in public space already, everybody is watching. So every your move is like mentioned and let's say shaping your price growth and your company growth. So that would be one of the interesting things how it was done. And can I ask, I think that it would be a public information if I would ask what like your company was acquired as well, right? So can you
Yeah.
tell me a little bit about that process, how it happened, which company acquired your company, and maybe what was the valuation if you can share?
Well, yeah, I mean, look, the valuation, it was a great deal for shareholders, and because it was a very big valuation uplift in a relatively short time, and I think it was s- symptomatic of those early days of gaming, where there was a lot of interest and a lot of, let's say, growth in this new industry that had come online. Even if it was, we weren't hardcore gambling, we weren't hardcore sports betting or casino. We were much more on the softer end of the market with
Mhm.
effectively skill based games,
Mhm.
because and that's why we were operating in the US legally. So I mean, I can't remember the exact exit was around about 580 million. The
Around
business was
600.
acquired from dollars, and that was by a company called Liberty Media, who now own Formula One. Most people know them for owning Formula One, but they own a bunch of other media assets, and they had amongst their media assets, they had sort of game shows and an online games division called Game Show Network. Fun Technology became a big part of that business. Then other businesses that we owned, like Don Best, were eventually sold on to other
Mhm.
individuals, like Benji Cherniak, who I think acquired that business from them, and then
Then
took it
growth.
forward.
Yeah. Okay. Seems like you had a really, really good foundation, and I'm like founding the SBC Advisory part of like later in your life. You had like experience with mergers and acquisitions, and you had your company acquired, like the company that you were working where was acquired as well. So you went through everything, like from investment banking into the corporate life, growing the company from like small scale to the big scale, and now you were ready for something new, as I understand, right?
Well, I thought it was easy, you know.
Come
No,
on.
I mean, look, I think one of the important things in your business career, life generally as well, not just business, but is to have real perspective in any moment in time. Don't just live a moment. Of course, everyone says live in the present. I subscribe to that, but have some perspective on where you're at. Look, that exit was the biggest exit I personally ever had. Wasn't the
Mhm.
most money I made, funnily enough, and that's part of the reason why I moved on. But that was a very early stage of the industry where a lot of investors were very interested in putting money into the sector, and there weren't many listed companies, and so it was perhaps easier to go out and raise a lot of money and build a business in that way quickly. I don't think you could necessarily do the same thing in those sectors now. It would be much harder. So but at the time, you think you can do it again. And of course you can, but you've got to understand the context in which you've done it and what you need to do differently in the future. I actually did then move on to start another company, which was a TV gambling business.
Mhm.
TV gambling, I think it exists to some extent now. I don't really follow it and don't know how much, but
I don't know about it, so can you tell me what's the TV betting is?
it's basically it's broadcasting live TV roulette
Mhm.
on TV channels late at night.
Mhm.
And at the time, we were even doing it using because this was 2006 to 2009. This business I had before I sold it. You were just coming online with web interfaces,
Mhm.
but some of the players would play using their mobile phones, for example, to place bets. So it was quite old school, but it was effectively like a TV production of,
Mhm.
say, 6 hours a night, having croupiers
Like spinning the like
spin roulette reels
what the
and
live
take.
casino is right now, but streamed on
Yeah, it's like a an evolution, but for TV, much more expensive to
evolution.
produce.
Yeah, of course.
Having TV channels or renting time on TV channels is expensive. So, it's a harder model to get right, and there weren't many people doing it. But
Mhm.
I was one of them, and I eventually sold that business to a competitor. But that competitor doesn't exist anymore. It was a company called NetPlay. It was listed on the AIM market in the UK.
Okay.
I sold to them in 2009, which was a tough time.
Yeah. The financial crisis was already there, right? If I
Yeah,
remember it correctly. Yeah.
yeah. So it was a good exit at a bad
Yeah,
time,
right
let's
time,
say.
right moment. But in a bit, it should be
Mm.
like right time for you, but not right time for the world itself. But it worked out, so that's good as well.
Yeah, but again, that kind of business doesn't really exist anymore. That net play doesn't exist anymore. Technology overtook it. Live online gaming
Live
made
online
it
gaming,
made it.
mobile phones became like a thing, and everybody has now access to the internet. And TV like declined. That's the thing. Even like biggest companies grew out of that era as well, and some transformed well, some didn't, and we now see the consequences of the ones that transformed and the ones that didn't. Oh, okay. So you added even more experience to it. So you had another exit. Like I'm trying to go to your, let's say, current role right now because I know about SBC Advisory. We have met from the startup slash advisory thing, and I really want to talk right now about SBC Advisory and your role and what was the idea behind it and how it started, how it's going as well. Like, tell a little bit to the, let's say, young entrepreneurs what they can get from SBC Advisory, and like let's discuss SBC Advisory and your role in it.
Well, I'd been doing advisory work for about since around 2012, let's say. Really
Mhm.
focused much more on advisory work, in a fairly entrepreneurial way. So working for larger companies, basically them large companies like IGT or previous versions of IGT and Novomatic. I did some work for William Hill, but I also did a lot of work with smaller businesses and in investor groups looking either to grow in their respective space in the iGaming industry or enter it. So it was a good vehicle for me to get involved in projects at early stage and also perhaps take some fees, but sometimes co-invest or invest time and take equity and take upside. So I was involved in quite a broad sort of number and types of projects. But fast forward, let's say, to sort of around the pandemic. I was already, even pre-pandemic, I was thinking, look, the industry's changed an enormous amount. There are lots of smart advisors out there because there was a lot of consolidation during that
Mhm.
eight to 10 years, and this continues to be, which left a lot of people in positions where they ended up being, setting up advisory firms or being sort of loose groups of advisors working together or single advisors. And so it became more of a challenge to stand out. And while I had a good, let's say, lifestyle business, my feeling was that if I wanted to build a more established business that outlived me and could continue after, you know, I'd stopped working, that I needed a stronger platform. And I'd looked at some competitors, a competitor called Partis, and they were founded by one of the founders of Pentasia, which is an HR company that everyone probably knows and many of us have
Mhm.
used. Good, really good companies, good entrepreneurs. They had used their HR business as a platform really to seed opportunities for advisory work.
Mhm.
And so I looked around the industry and thought, well, how could I do that? And who can I talk to? So I called up Rasmus, who's the founder of SBC, who's a
Yeah.
very old friend of mine. I've known him since the early 2000s when he was actually working at the start of Every Matrix. He was head of sales before he started SBC.
SBC itself. Yeah.
And yeah, we discussed it. He sort of sat on the idea. He was dealing with, it was starting to be the pandemic, and was dealing with a lot with his business, moving from events to being purely digital, and was
Yeah.
grappling
Oh,
with a
I
lot. But
remember those times. Like that first year, like everybody went online, and SBC did a great job surviving it. We had marketing from SBC, and it was like he told a little bit, let's say, what was happening behind the curtains and how much like and how well they handled all those like downsides of the business and how it helped them to grow to the level that they are today.
yeah, I mean, it's been amazing growth since then, and yeah, around that time, as SBC was emerging from the pandemic, we set up SBC Advisory. I think Raz bought into the idea, and we've been working on the business ever since. SBC are a sort of a platform and partner to support us, but we're an independent business co-owned between
Mhm.
myself and um, another partner and SBC. So we're I would say a fairly I don't know if traditional is the right word, but sort of normal consulting business. We're strategy consulting business, I should say. We work in the
Mhm.
areas of we also work in the area of regulation as well. One of our partners is a lawyer. I think you probably know him, Carino Mancini. I think maybe he was on the podcast at some
Yeah,
point in
he
the
was. He
past. Yeah,
was.
yeah. So
I can't.
Carino's
I won't lie. I still cannot pronounce his surname. So I was like training for maybe one day. Like our producer Shota was making me pronounce his name, and I still cannot pronounce his surname right. Mancini. Mancini. I think that that's the right way.
I
By the
think you
way,
did a
hello.
great job.
Yeah. maybe after all the training, maybe, but it was, but yeah, we talked a lot about regulation, what's right, like that there are no benchmarks. We have talked about what OneXBet and SBC has done with the player protection index and so on and so on. I think that we can discuss that little bit as well, but just to finish up what you were telling, still coming back, but still Mancini has to be
Yes.
mentioned here.
So yeah, so we're quite all different. The key founders, let's say Raz and his team at SBC, then Karina and myself, we've all got very different skill sets and different networks, which are all complementary, and that leads to I think a very solid and
Good
successful
foundation, yeah.
mix. Yeah, access to opportunities, and also you know experience that we can apply to advising our clients.
I think that one thing that we have to mention is also what type of companies usually come to SBC advisors. Are these like real, like early stage startups? Are these like already established companies that are seeking for like maybe additional investment or maybe like advisor into entering like few markets or about regulation? So can you like little bit describe about the portfolio of the companies involved with you, just for like not every other startup hitting you or maybe every other company hitting up you, like what is, let's say, the clientele, or I think the partners types that usually come to SBC advisory.
Look, I think in our current form, and we're always evolving, but right now we tend to work with medium and larger companies because they can afford
Yeah, advising.
consultancy fees. Yeah, just naturally
Yeah,
speaking.
but I have like, but yeah, that's quite it. Okay, can I ask you a little bit about like what is the you stepping into the shoes of the co-founder, and like when you like first co-founded, like what I'm trying to seek right now is that you always mention somebody else, like person that you co-founded this or that company with. I always, before going into the startup journey, I always thinking the importance of the co-founder and how it is hard, because I have tried myself, not a startup in the startup world, but starting a business with a friend, and it never worked out. It's like affected our friendship. It affected the business itself because some of the people get involved more, some have no time and get involved less. So can you like little bit provide me information regarding about if people want to start a company, what is the let's say importance of choosing the right co-founders, and have you worked with your friends as a co-founders or friends as a let's say partners in crime?
The short answer is yes, and I think the results have been varied. I've a current business with someone who I was friends
I
with
remember that.
before we started the business together, and it's been pretty successful, and we work well together. There's a lot of trust between us, and we rarely ever have a major disagreement. So it's actually been, a relatively smooth and successful partnership. But I've also been in business with friends or helped friends, and then it's worked out very badly, and I've lost friendships. So I think you need to be very, very careful. And often people, when they're starting a business, they either start it through conversation with friends, or they consult friends, and people they know in the industry who they think that they can that might be a good fit. And look, so it's quite natural, but you need to be very careful about how you approach it and be quite rigorous in terms of determining if you're both or how many of you are a good fit with each other. Complementary skill sets. I mean, you don't want two people that do the same thing, otherwise you end up stepping on each other's shoes and arguing about things all the time. You want complementary skill sets. You probably want personalities which
Predict.
are actually more complementary, I think. I mean, because you don't want to. I think actually it's better when you challenge each other when you're more complementary personalities, because you've got the same sort of values, mindset, you trust each other, but you can still challenge each other, rather than someone who you don't really get on with and you challenge. That's a more of a recipe for conflict. So yeah, I would say that there's also a bit of luck involved in terms of you never quite know how things are going to turn out.
Okay. You mentioned right now the world in our business that always comes up at some point, and I really want to ask you, what do you think is, let's say, what do you think about luck? Is luck real luck, or luck is what you create and what moment gives you?
It's both. This is
Both?
absolutely. I mean, you create your own luck absolutely by putting yourself in good positions. Be we said people say the right place, the right time, um, and putting together the right set of resources, people, financial resources, etc. You do create your own luck, but you also
Hmm.
need some luck along the way to get that right, because you can't get every decision right being a
Yeah, of course.
business person or entrepreneur. Most of your time in building business problem solving. And
Yeah.
that's why I have a SBC advisory, because we're just basically problem solvers. We help now more established businesses solve problems of growth actually more often
Yeah. Scaling,
than
growth.
anything else. Scaling, yeah, entering new markets, understanding new markets. And these are companies that were established, so they need less luck along the way, because they've already had,
Yeah.
they're already established and have the resources to fund their growth. But I think look, luck is I think anyone that tells you that they're a genius and they did it all on their own, and I think has got is a
Some
narcissist.
BS there. Yeah. I think that what you said about the entrepreneurs and about the business and like business thinking persons, I think that I always compare them to firefighters. So they are like as close to the problems and they are solving the problem by like putting up the fires around the company. So that is the thing that every business person should know, that there will be many types of fires. So main thing is to put out the right fire at the right time, because you cannot put out all the fires. That means that then your company is not doing new things and you're not making mistakes in order to grow. One crucial thing here is that as far as you described yourself like as a dinosaur of the industry, I really want to ask you this. And everybody that tells me that they have more than 20 years of experience, I'm still at the half point. I'm really interested in how do you keep this industry, let's say, interesting for you, and what drives the motivation to do more within this industry. So can you tell me about your drive and what gives you the drive to keep pushing and keep doing this after 12, 20 years?
Well, I think would look. I've got businesses outside of this industry now, which I've
Yeah.
moved into, which I feel are perhaps even more interesting in a way in certain respects than even
Hmm.
gaming. There are faster moving, more innovative industries out there with less regulation, perhaps as well, which allow you to be more grow businesses more easily with less capital. But in gaming, I've gone through phases. I went through a phase of early stage investing and working a lot with entrepreneurs, and that was super fun. Some of it was successful, so I made some money, but it's very hard. The learning that I had from that was, while really enjoyed it, and you learn a lot from the next generation in terms of their skill sets, their understanding of where markets and products are perhaps are going. It's still hard to actually make money and have successful exits, especially when you're not in control of those businesses. So one of the things that taught me was the best person to invest in was myself, and so most of the investment that I do now are into companies that I effectively have a strong element of control in.
Hmm.
But then in gaming, now I've moved into the back into advisory. I started life out as an advisor, as an investment banker, and I wanted to get out of that. But then I've moved back into it 25 years later, because it gives me access to interesting companies, individuals, very talented, successful individuals that are working on super uh, engaging projects, and I get paid to help them deliver those. So that diversity of different types of projects and companies and talented individuals is very engaging.
Mm, yeah, got it. So, learning more, investing in yourself, and meeting new people, and having the access to like new ideas keeps you rolling. That's great. I think that we are approaching the, let's say, our culmination. not culmination, I would say that a tradition of ours in our podcast from the day one. And after 18th episodes, we are still rolling with it because I love this part. It's a blind question from the previous guests to the future one without, of course, knowing who the next one would be. By the way, I swear, even I don't know who the next one would be at this moment. So this is from Dimitri Starostenkov, the CEO of EvenBet. And his question to you, Anton, was that for iGaming, for our industry, and for players, what's your opinion about regulation? Will it kill our industry, or is it actually good for the industry and for the players? And also his ask was, let's talk about gambling operators separately and players separately. So regulations for gambling operators and for players. Is it good? Is it bad? What's your take?
I mean, I think regulation is fundamentally good. It's how regulation is applied, and over regulation is clearly bad. So it's about getting the balance. We're talking from a company perspective at the moment. It's about getting that balance right between creating industries that are so heavily regulated that any innovation is quashed, and there's no room for new entrants, and there's no room for we talk about a lot in gaming, because as more and more regulation and the cost is put into force, and the costs of compliance increases, it's one of the factors that drives consolidation, and the fact that
Monopoly.
only the larger
Yeah.
companies can really afford to operate in those highly regulated markets, and it creates oligopolies, which is, I think, there are some I think there are lots of, as an entrepreneur, you look at that and you think that's a negative thing. The positives are that you create, sort of, for regulators, they have a smaller number of companies who are
Too many.
highly professionalized and take regulation seriously because it's part of their core business model and their competitive advantage. So I think for regulators, it makes their lives easier. But for entrepreneurs, yeah, it certainly doesn't seem like a perfect world. And when
What
it
about
comes
players?
to, yeah, I think regulation's good. I think we mentioned earlier that the work SBC and I've been involved in as well, the work of the player protection index that was recently produced in conjunction with OneXBet. That was a super interesting project. It's not an area where historically I would have been as actively engaged and actively interested as an entrepreneur. You're always thinking about growth, and I've always been cared about players, because we're in the business of entertainment. Ultimately, whatever anyone says, we compete in the entertainment space, and therefore you want to make sure that you're entertaining players rather than taking advantage of vulnerable people. So I've always, when I have operated, and for example, when I had my TV gambling, was always responsible in that way. But it was not quite as interesting area as all the other things and innovations that were going on in the industry. But now, spending more time looking at player protection, it's much more part of the industry's, or certainly the responsible operating industry's core business model from the board level down. It's taken seriously by investors, and a lot of progress has been made. And I think technology as well is making it so much easier. The developments in AI around sort of more programmatic profiling of individuals
Individuals, yeah.
and searching up problem gamblers, and beginning to integrate personalized care into the actual, with chatbots, etc., into the gaming experience. I think it's quite an innovative area of gaming now, and important. There's still a lot to do. There's still a lot of lack of clarity and consistency across regulators, is what the work that was done on the player protection index showed. But it is moving in a positive direction, definitely underpinned by the fast developments in new technologies.
Got it. Thanks for such a. I think that Dimitri would be proud about our guest, Anton, because you were right
Well,
person
thank
to
you,
ask
Dimitri.
this. So So he got it right. Now I'm moving to your question. What will be your question to our guests that I won't be able to host for another year, I would say, because we are in the final episode. So what's your question to our next guest?
Yeah, probably more of a personal question, because I'm always
Mhm.
interested in the journey that an individual, an entrepreneur, an executive takes in their life and their career. So my question is, what is the most expensive mistake you have personally made in your career, whether it be financially, reputationally, or perhaps even emotionally? How would you handle it today if you had the chance of starting over? And most importantly, what positive lessons did it teach you that led to future success?
Oh my God, you are putting the next person on the pedestal, and let's see what he or she answers, because I think that's one of my, when I'm interviewing new people, like for a hire, one of the questions that I ask is that, like, not to tell me about his like most successful project or something like that. I'm always asking about their biggest failure project that they have ever did or what they have worked on. And it always puts a person in the uncomfortable shoes because they have to, let's say, remember all the shame and remember all the bad emotions they have faced. And I love this question so much. Even I always like have that question in mind to like ask myself, am I making like big mistake right now doing this? Like just in order to keep myself in check, not to tell. But I have such a many fun stories to tell about that because everybody has done a fuck up. Everybody, it was either like a financial, reputational, emotional, as you said. So let's see what the next guest will be, who the next guest will be, and what will be his answer. Thank you, Anton.
I look forward to
And
listening to it.
yeah, I think that we can wrap this up. And as far as this is our last episode for this year, I really will take a few moments to say thank you to everyone who is listening. Say thank you to SBC Erasia for doing this podcast and choosing me as a host. I really want to wish everybody a happy new year and Merry Christmas and to enjoy all the family time with the families. And still, even though all the wishes coming to your way, don't forget to subscribe to us in all the channels that you are listening this podcast to. And one more time, Anton. Today we had Anton, a guest from SBC Advisory, and he told us really good stories about insights about the industry and how has he done such a wonderful job. Thank you, Anton, one more time, and wish you happy New Year.
Yeah, thank you very much, and same to you, and same to everyone.